Hi again. In Edmond Gruss, we left Jehovah's Witnesses' personal testimonies. We're on page 147 of his chapter 9, covering the years 1930-1939 in the chapter The Jehovah's Witnesses, a non-profit organization. The decade 1930 to 1939 saw the abandoning of specific date setting, but readers of the Watchtower material were assured that the Battle of Armageddon was near. Rutherford explained the new position for this period, and here's a quote from the book Vindication, published in 1931, 3 volumes actually, on the book of Ezekiel, replacing the material that was in the Finished Mystery in 1917. Here's the quote. There was a measure of disappointment on the part of Jehovah's faithful ones on earth concerning the years 1914, 1918, and 1925, dates that had been set up in the Finished Mystery and Millions Now Living Will Never Die, which disappointment lasted for a time. Later the faithful learned that these dates were definitely fixed in the Scriptures, so they're not backing off the dates, again reinterpreting them. And they also learned to quit fixing dates for the future and predicting what would come to pass on a certain date, but to rely, and they do rely, upon the Word of God as to the events that must come to pass. End of quote. In the book Light, Volume 2, this is Rutherford's substitution for the Revelation material in the Finished Mystery, both published by the way, 1930. Rutherford wrote, "The great climax is at hand. The kings of earth now set themselves against his anointed stone." Stoned, capitalized, meaning, of course, the kingdom, as is still interpreted, as far as I can tell, by the Watchtower. It's not so much Christ coming to rule the earth as it is in classic exposition of the Daniel passage, Daniel 2:44, etc. But it is the kingdom being set up invisibly, but that stone's activity or judgment will not be realized for the people who live on the earth until Armageddon comes at some uncertain future date. Gruss says, a year later, the first of 3 volumes of Vindication appeared, in which Rutherford warned, quote, God's kingdom has begun to operate. Again, this is you might not realize it here, but they're still clinging to the 1878 date for the kingdom coming and 1914 for the end of the Gentile times. And of course, 1874 is still being held for the invisible presence. So Rutherford says God's kingdom has begun to operate. His day of vengeance is here, and Armageddon is at hand and certain to fall upon Christendom, and that within an early date. God's judgment is upon Christendom and must shortly be executed. End of quote. In his study on the Jehovah's Witnesses, Herbert H. Stroup commented on the continuing importance of the theme of the booklet, Millions Now Living Will Never Die, even in the early 1930s. Quote, the theme of the booklet was so rich an energizer of his followers and so compelling an idea in itself that even as late as 1932, Mr. Rutherford was still delivering talks upon it. In that year, he declared that the religious work of the witnesses was coming to a conclusion, that the end was only a short time away, and that the end was much less than the length of a generation. Gruss goes on. The book Salvation, 1939, also stressed the nearness of Armageddon. Here's 2 quotes from Salvation. The abundance of scriptural evidence, together with the physical facts that have come to pass, showing the fulfillment of prophecy, conclusively proves that the time for the battle of the great day of God the Almighty is very near, and that in that battle all of God's enemies shall be destroyed, and the earth cleared of wickedness. By the way, that's a new thought, too. In the Russell era, and even after that into the Millions era, up to 1925, the thought was not that Armageddon would destroy everybody but Jehovah's Witnesses. This is Rutherford's new light. And also from Salvation, this quote, likewise today, all the nations and peoples of earth are face to face with the greatest emergency. They are being warned, as God commands, that the disaster of Armageddon is just ahead. Next time, the period 1940 to 49. I'll put in a link to a video we did on their doctrine, their interpretation of the Revelation 7 last trumpets. When did they sound? See you soon.